On the day my wife gave birth to Bok Noyet Kwang's child, to prevent me from causing a riot, my wife's parents called 10 bodyguards to guard outside the delivery room. But until the birth was over, I still didn't show up to cause trouble. My mother-in-law grabbed my wife's hand, sighed and said, "Vunin, don't worry. With us here, we will absolutely not let him come even half a step closer to you. Your father even brought someone to watch at the hospital gate. If he dares to come, we will break his legs." My wife nodded weakly but still reflexively looked towards the elevator door. However, the place was completely empty. Only then did she breathe a sigh of relief. She couldn't understand. She was just helping Bok Noyet Kwang save the last drop of blood. Why can't I sympathize with her? Looking at the crying child in the nurse's arms, she smiled contentedly and thought to herself, "If he can come to visit the child tomorrow, I will no longer consider the previous quarrels, and will also agree to let him be the father of my child." But she didn't know that I had just filed an application with the United Nations. In 7 days, I will give up my citizenship, become a doctor without borders, and never return here again. The day Chu Vu was discharged from the postpartum care center was also the day I had just completed the handover procedures at the hospital. As soon as I walked to the door, I heard happy laughter inside. This child is so adorable. His eyes are big and round just like his father. The mother-in-law was delighted, holding the baby in her arms, while Ton Din brought out a bowl of hot chicken soup from the kitchen. "I cooked this soup myself. Your body is still very weak. You need to supplement it a lot." He sat down by the bed and gently fed Chu Vunin spoonfuls of soup. That warm scene is like a real family. The father-in-law held the tambourine in his hand and laughed so much that he couldn't close his mouth. This child is truly likable. He looks exactly like his father. Luckily, he's not like that cold-faced guy from Tu Hang. If he didn't have a doctor father, he would definitely be in trouble. My hand that was holding the doorknob suddenly tightened. I suddenly remembered the first time I met my father-in-law. He patted my shoulder and said, "Being a doctor is very good. Saving people is the pride of the whole family." He also said that in the past he was also a doctor. If it wasn't for being assaulted by a patient and injuring his hand, he wouldn't have had to retire early. But now he says doctors don't deserve a home. I only studied abroad for 1 year, but this house now has absolutely no room for me anymore. I bowed my head and gave a bitter smile. Chu Vunin and I have been married for 3 years. She said that she is a believer in not having children, and I also understand that having children is like passing through death's door. So I never forced her to have children. I still remember the day she went to study abroad. She cried until her eyes turned red, saying she couldn't bear to leave me. Obviously, for the past year, we have called every day to share our lives with each other. Even our colleagues around us often tease us that we've been married for 3 years and still feel like a newlywed couple. However, a month ago, I had a hard time asking for leave to go home. Even though I had to sit for 8 hours on the plane, I didn't complain about being tired at all. Yet when I rushed home, I saw Chu Vu suddenly surpassing me with a pregnant belly, standing next to her first love, Ton Din. My thoughts were pulled back to reality by Ton Din's words. "When did you come back from me? Why are you still standing outside the door without coming in?" Hearing him say that, everyone in the room looked towards the door. When my father-in-law saw the resignation letter in my hand, his face immediately became gloomy. "What was I thinking before, giving my daughter to someone like you? What bad luck. Now that you quit your job and don't work anymore, are you going to let these 2 old people raise you? Why is there no husband like you in this world?" My mother-in-law also joined in blaming me. "Even with such a stable job, you still can't do it. Tell me, what else can you do? Vu's body is weak now, and both he and the child need a lot of money. If you don't go to work, can the whole family of 3 drink the northwest wind and survive?" Hearing these words, I just felt funny. Someone's wife and children will be taken care of by themselves. Tu Hang, what are you talking about? Don't you have any responsibility? Chu Vunin finally couldn't bear it anymore. His red eyes shouted loudly at me. Perhaps because she was too excited, she clutched her chest and coughed violently. 3 years ago, if it wasn't for Ton Din saving me in the car accident, I probably would have died. Both of his parents have passed away, and now he's been diagnosed with terminal cancer. Maybe soon, no one in this world will remember him anymore. Why do you keep targeting him like that? Is it possible that in your heart, I am that kind of dirty woman, holding up paper? Ton Din sadly patted her back to help her get along. then turned to look at me. Please stop talking a bit. I know it's all my fault. I promise from now on I won't appear in your lives anymore. But please don't affect your relationship as husband and wife because of me, okay? I looked at the 4 people in front of me, realizing they were standing on the same front line. The more I think, the more ridiculous I feel. It turns out this is a real family. At this time, Chuvu suddenly spoke up. Tu Hang, my patience is limited. If you continue to target Tan Din for no reason in the future, then don't return to this house anymore. If you still want to continue living with me, then behave properly. Next week, at my baby's first month party, you can declare in front of relatives and friends that you are the baby's father. Next week, I glanced at the baby sleeping soundly in the stroller. Next week, I will leave abroad. But before I leave, I don't hesitate to leave them a gift that they will never forget for the rest of their lives. Without any expression, I nodded. Having finished speaking, I didn't care about their reactions, turned around, and went straight to the room to pack up my things. When I decided to leave completely, I didn't want to leave any traces of myself here anymore. Cheerful laughter from the living room spread through the door. My hands folded the clothes and paused slightly. Mr. Tan Din, I want my son to have your last name. That way, even if he calls someone else dad in the future, he will always remember that you are his real father. Without having to see it with my own eyes, I can imagine how gentle and sincere Chuvu Nin said when he said this. As for my heart, it has long been hurt by her to the point of being torn to pieces, with no way to mend it. I suddenly remembered last month, when I hurriedly returned home, still holding a special souvenir bought from abroad for Chuvu Nin. But as soon as I got to the door, I saw her and Tan Din hand in hand, just returning from a walk. Unlike Chuvu Nin's panicked expression, Tan Din just looked at me with suspicious eyes. Did you go to the wrong house? I didn't say anything, just silently stared at Chuvu Nin's protruding belly. Ex-house in months, but my wife is pregnant. No matter how much I deceive myself, I cannot believe that this child is mine. Until Chuvu suddenly panicked and stood in front of him, Tan Din introduced him. This is my husband, Tu Hang. I thought that when he heard that sentence, Tan Din would be timid and restrain himself. But no, he was like a true homeowner. Come inside and sit for a while. As we passed each other, he lowered his voice just enough for the two of us to hear. I heard you're a lot older than me, so I'll call you Big Brother. After all, your wife is pregnant with my child. Anger flared up in my chest. I couldn't hold it any longer. A powerful punch. Straight to his face, I completely lost control. All the longing for Chuvu Nin turned into anger. If I had a knife in my hand at that time, I probably would have really killed this scum couple. Until the neighbors heard the noise and called the police, we were all taken to the station. But because this was a family matter, the police could not intervene and could only tell us to go home first. As soon as I got home, my parents-in-law rushed over without asking a word, just cursing me severely. You just came back and caused such a big scene that the neighbors laughed at you. All those years of studying were all in vain. If you hit someone, if something happens, don't expect us to ignore it. It turns out that they always knew about the relationship between Chuvu Nin and Tan Din, and even wholeheartedly supported both of them. Yet all this time, I was the only one who was deceived and ignorant. My throat was bitter, and my heart was in extreme pain. Chuvu Nin trembled and walked up to me, tried to pull my hand back, and gently advised, I never thought of betraying you. It's just that Tan Din's health is not good. The doctor said he only had half a year to live at most. I couldn't bear to let him go without a child. Before that, I also thought about discussing it with you, but you were abroad. I was afraid that you would worry and it would affect my studies, so I decided to wait for you to come home and talk. If you agree, can we raise this baby together? The story of giving birth to children came out of her mouth so gently. I packed the last set of clothes into my suitcase. At this moment, my mother-in-law pushed open the door and walked in. Seeing the suitcase at my feet, a satisfied look appeared on her face. It's good to be reasonable. Since you weren't at home before, I let Tan Din sleep in your room. The office was also converted into a baby room. Tonight you can sleep in the living room or go to the hotel. I was really too tired and didn't have the energy to look for a hotel anymore, so I just quietly nodded and intended to spend a temporary night on the sofa. But at midnight, the sound of a baby crying came from the bedroom. I tried to put on the headset, but I heard an angry voice say, Quickly comfort the child, otherwise he will keep crying. Aren't you my baby? Taking care of you is enough. Babies cry a little more to make their lungs stronger. I pulled the blanket over my head, trying to ignore those painful sounds. But as soon as I closed my eyes, the image of Chu Vunin confessing to me for the first time appeared in my mind. Back then, she was so simple and bright, with only me in her eyes. But that person no longer belongs to me. I kept dreaming like that and slept through the night. Early the next morning, I picked up my suitcase and left home. Sometime later, I went to the management agency to cancel my household registration and at the same time complete the procedures to go abroad. Because there are documents approved by the government, all procedures are processed very quickly. The staff also didn't ask much. It wasn't until I was about to leave that a staff member suddenly called me back. She gave me a fruit candy. I hope you get what you want. I smiled at her with relief and left the office. I was about to find something to eat, but unexpectedly, I ran into Chu Vunin, Tan Din, and my wife's parents. Tan Din wore an expensive tailored suit, looking full of vitality and high spirits. Looking at him like this, he doesn't look like he's about to die. He saw it from afar just now, thought it was Mr. Vunin, then said he couldn't be here. His eyes fell on the recruitment flyer in my hand, smiling as if he understood everything. So you're looking for a job? But with your skinny figure, isn't the chief machinist doing manual work making himself miserable? I don't answer. This leaflet was given to me by a little girl on the street in the cold weather. Seeing that she was still trying, I just conveniently took one sheet. Seeing me silent, just clutching the piece of paper in my hand, Tan Din smiled mockingly. Why didn't you say earlier that you were looking for a job? Maybe I can help with something. After all, we are all family. If you live well, Vunin's second half of his life will also have support, and I will feel more secure. My silence felt like an admission. Chu Vunin was initially skeptical, but his expression immediately changed. She frowned tightly, her eyes looking at me full of anger. What else can I introduce? He gave up his good job as a doctor on his own. Now even if he starves to death on the street, no one will pity him. From death to you, you really don't have any responsibility at all. Do you think like this you can force me to give up the baby? I looked at that once familiar face, but at this moment I felt extremely strange. I remember when I first got married, because I was caught up in the infighting in the hospital, my position was affected. I thought about quitting my job and changing careers. At that time, Chu Vunin just hugged me gently, patted my back, and whispered in my ear, "Husband and wife are one body. No matter what you decide, I will support you. So what if you quit your job? I believe that a bright pearl like you will never be buried. Husband, I will always be by your side." But the person who said he would always be by my side now let another man humiliate me. She forgot the words she said to me, and also forgot the deep love I once had for her. Even my wife's parents stood beside me, shaking their heads in disappointment as if I were the most useless person in the world. Before, it was true that my eyes were blind and I was about to entrust my daughter's entire life to you. Luckily, we are still alive. If we had died, I don't know how you would have tortured her. The more the two of them spoke, the more outrageous they became, attracting the attention of passers-by. Everyone stopped to look at us. My hands clenched into fists, preparing to speak. Tan Din suddenly stepped forward. We're preparing to take pictures of your family, or should I come along too? Either way, I'll still have to ask you to take care of Vunin and the baby. Chu Vunin immediately interrupted him, laughing coldly and contemptuously. Look at his poor appearance. If he steps into the frame, he will only embarrass the whole family. Having finished speaking, she turned and went straight into the studio, not forgetting to urge Tan Din to quickly follow. We'll leave now. Won't bother you looking for a job anymore. Tan Din patted my shoulder meaningfully before leaving. Watching their backs disappear, there was no longer a ripple in my heart. In the eyes of outsiders, this is truly a harmonious and happy family. If that's what Chu Vunin wants, then I give my blessing. It's okay. 3 days before leaving, I received a text message from the director. He said that the expert I contacted earlier, who had just returned home today to attend the forum, could help test my father-in-law for coronary heart disease. My father-in-law's heart is not healthy. A few years ago, I had an emergency, so when I studied abroad, I asked my colleagues to collect more documents with similar cases for reference. After all, many years of gratitude still help him check his health. Now that I'm done with them, there's nothing left to worry about anymore. But as soon as I mentioned taking him to the doctor, My father-in-law's face immediately darkened. What's the point of going to the hospital when you're suddenly healthy? This brat, do you want to wipe my ass? My previous coronary artery bypass surgery was clearly successful. What else should I check? There's a top cardiologist who happens to be in the country today. Dad can take advantage of it to check it out. It's best to prevent illness first. But before I could finish my sentence, my father-in-law angrily threw the glass of water straight at me. You're very good at saying beautiful things. The top expert you talk about can't be found by anyone who wants to meet him. Who can an unemployed person like you date? You're just talking nonsense. Look at Ton Din. He kept staying up all night just to get the number to see a specialist for me. Where were you at that time? He constantly compared me to Ton Din. Attitude says it all. No matter what I do, it's all wrong. No matter how hard I try, I can't be as good as Ton Din. Realizing this, I could only laugh bitterly. If Dad doesn't want to go, then that's fine. Just pretend you're still worrying about money and humiliating yourself. Very quickly, the day of the baby's first month party arrived. I intentionally arrived late. As soon as I entered the banquet hall, it was already crowded. Relatives felt even more solemn than my wedding with Chu Vunin the day before. Right in front of the party door, a family photo of 5 people was solemnly displayed, which to me was just a farce from start to finish. As soon as they saw me appear, relatives immediately whispered, "You don't need to listen to guess what they are saying." Not long after, an aunt ran up to me, grabbed my hand, and warmly asked, "When did you return home? So why didn't you hear anything about Vunin? I heard that you returned from studying abroad and are about to be promoted to official department head at Trunghung Hospital. The future is very bright." I didn't answer, just nodded slightly as a courtesy, but I could see their eyes were filled with pity, so clear that it couldn't be hidden. Anyway, in that family photo, I'm not there. The person who was always next to Chu Vunin at the party was not me. A chatty person pointed into the distance, where a man was thoughtfully preparing dessert for Chu Vunin, and asked, "Who is he? I've never heard of your family having a younger brother." I smiled faintly. Chu Vunin's new husband. The people around were all waiting to talk. The aunts immediately widened their eyes and then gathered together to whisper. Anyway, Chu Vunin and her family don't care, so why do I need to help them hide it? At this moment, Chu Vunin stepped onto the stage and took the microphone. "Thank you everyone for coming to my son's victory party. Before, I never thought I would be a mother. I always felt like I couldn't take on this role well. But right at the moment in the delivery room, hearing my child's first cry, I realized how sacred motherly love is." She spoke emotionally, as if she was just a second away from making herself cry. The aunt standing next to me suddenly shouted loudly, "Let the child's father come up and say a few words." Where's the child's father? The atmosphere in the banquet hall immediately became tense. Everyone's eyes moved back and forth between me and Ton Din. The answer was obvious, but this aunt wanted to force Chu Vunin to admit it herself. I looked straight into Chu Vunin's eyes, then slowly walked onto the stage. Under her panicked look, I calmly pulled out the microphone from her hand. "What are you going to do? I warn you, don't talk nonsense. Otherwise, I won't leave it alone." Her eyes flashed with panic. She pulled my sleeve tightly, warning in a low voice, but I still calmly withdrew my hand, not even looking at her once. "If you don't do bad things, why are you afraid of ghosts?" I continued in a calm voice. "First of all, thank you everyone for not being afraid to travel far to attend today's victory party. Everyone here is the one who witnessed me and Chu Vunin walking down the aisle after getting married. I always remember everyone's blessings. But surely when you entered the banquet hall, everyone also saw the family photo hanging at the door." Hearing this, Chu Vunin's face immediately changed. She angrily rushed forward and tried to snatch the microphone from my hand. I quickly dodged, grabbed the microphone tightly, and continued speaking. Honestly, even I was surprised when I saw that photo. But what surprised me most was that after returning from studying abroad for a year, I discovered that my wife, who had insisted on not wanting children, was 8 months pregnant. I took a deep breath, speaking neither fast nor slow. "I can't swallow this. I don't want to bear this injustice. Chu Vunin, let's divorce." I pulled out the divorce agreement that I had prepared a long time ago from my pocket and threw it hard at her feet. This is what I've wanted to do since the day I saw her and Ton Din embracing each other. Chu Vunin's face turned pale. She panicked and reached out to take back the microphone, wanting to control this chaotic atmosphere. But she also wanted to hold my arm, wanted to explain something. I smiled coldly. Can't you understand me? Haven't I already told you? As long as you don't bring this up again, we will live well in the future as a family of 3. Who is a family of 3? I smirked. You can have anyone, as long as it's not me. And I don't want to continue to deceive myself anymore. Sign, there's nothing more to say between us. I put the pen on the agreement, then gave it to her. I wish you happiness. Chuvunin shook his head vigorously. I won't sign. I don't agree to divorce you. To hang, don't dream. Actually, before, when I contacted a lawyer to draw up a divorce agreement, the lawyer said that I could ask Chuvunin to leave without taking any assets with me. After all, in this marriage, she clearly gave birth to another man's child. This is the clearest evidence of adultery. But from investigation and evidence collection to the court's verdict, everything takes too much time. I'm about to leave this country. No matter how much money I have in my hand, there's nowhere to spend it. So I just took the assets that originally belonged to me and entrusted them to a lawyer. After I leave, I will donate all the money to the elementary school in the mountains. Between me and Chuvunin, there is nothing more to say to each other. Looking at the chaotic scene before me, I turned around and left. But Chuvunin was not willing, picked up the baby, gave it to his parents, and quickly ran after me. But after just a few steps, Tandin, who was healthy, suddenly clutched his chest and panted. Vunin, I'm so upset. Perhaps because he was so excited just now, he felt like he was about to be unable to bear it anymore. Tandin, are you okay? Try your best. I'll take you to the hospital. She could only watch me walk away step by step, thinking that when everything was over, she would find me to talk things out clearly. Anyway, as long as she refuses to sign the divorce papers, the relationship between the two of us will remain intact. Thinking that, Chuvunin felt a little more relieved. The whole group rushed to take Tandin to the hospital, but on the way, Chuvunin's father seemed to be too excited and his heart rate increased rapidly. She was so worried that she burst into tears, not knowing who to take care of first. Just as Chuvunin's father was about to be pushed into the operating room, they happened to meet the director and a leading cardiovascular expert. At this moment, Chuvunin didn't have time to think. He quickly rushed to kneel in front of the dean and begged, "Please save my father. His condition is very dangerous." Previously, there was a person named Tandin who came to line up to register for an examination with you. Do you remember? The powerful expert stared at Chuvunin for a moment, then hesitantly asked, "You are Tu Hang's wife, right?" Previously, he asked the dean to contact me, hoping I could help examine his father-in-law. At that time, I also saw your photo on his phone. Chuvunin was stunned, raised his head with both confusion and surprise in his eyes. They never believed that I had the ability to contact a reputable expert. They always thought that everything was handled by Tandin, but now they know that they have always misunderstood me. At this moment, Chuvunin didn't know what to say. The director pulled her aside, just smiled apologetically, and said, "Sorry, Chu. We have to fly to America later to attend a conference. I'm afraid we won't be able to participate in this surgery. But please rest assured, our medical team is the best in the city. We will definitely try our best to save your father." Having finished speaking, the two of them left one after another. As for this matter, I only heard the director tell me. After that, Chuvunin knelt in front of the hospital's operating room, next to her mother with a face full of regret. "It's good now," she said. "What did Mom say before? No matter how shameless Tu Hang is, you can't take this as a joke, but you guys don't believe it. Have you seen the consequences now? If something really happened to your father, then you are the biggest sinner." The anger made the baby in her arms scared and crying. She angrily placed the child on the plastic chair next to her. "What are you crying for? All day long, you only cry." Anyone who doesn't know would think that this family gave birth to that ancestor, but at this time, Chuvunin no longer had the mind to pay attention to it. She slowly took out her phone, intending to call me. Perhaps now only I can contact a leading specialist for surgery. However, my phone could not be reached, because at that time I was on a flight abroad. My head leaned against the window, watching the scenery outside gradually recede until the powerful thrust lifted the plane high through the deep blue sky. I just realized I was lost in a surreal world, where everything seemed separate from reality. From this moment on, I no longer have any nationality. I will dedicate myself to the whole world. After more than 10 hours of flying, my teammates and I landed tired. The scenery here is completely different from the peace of home. War and weapons are everywhere. Even a little carelessness can lead to loss of life. On the bus, our medical captain introduced the local situation. At the same time, he gave each of them a gun. He said, "Saving people is important, but more important than the mission is your own life." That sentence shocked me. Suddenly, I remembered the years I was married to Chuvu Nin. At that time, I considered her everything. At that time, didn't I also consider her more important than my own life? Soon we arrived. On the muddy road, many wounded soldiers sat in enlightenment. Fresh blood stained their arms or legs red. They now know that this area has just undergone a bombing raid. Those with more serious injuries had the entire operating room filled up, so they could only be left to temporarily sit on the street. I threw away all other thoughts and rushed to help them. But that's just the beginning. In the months that followed, each experience changed my view of the world, and at the same time, I became more and more steadfast in the path I had chosen. I have never regretted coming here, nor have I ever regretted becoming a doctor without borders. Until one afternoon, a colleague rushed over to say someone was looking for me. I thought it was a patient just about to walk out. The colleague continued, "It seems like someone from the country came. Is a girl." My steps paused slightly, and the image of Chuvu Nin immediately appeared in my mind. Before she could open her mouth to refuse, she came to the place. "Is it really you from the goods?" Her eyes were red, and she rushed towards me and hugged me. I felt hot tears falling down my neck. It felt a bit unnatural, so I quickly pushed her away. I remember as soon as I got on the plane, the lawyer sent me a text message. He said the divorce lawsuit has been officially filed. Regardless of whether Chuvu Nin agrees or not, according to the law, half a month later our marriage will officially end. Divorce. So why is she working so hard to come all the way here now? Chuvu Nin, we're divorced. You're gone. A lot has happened in the past. My dad, he passed away. Her voice choked. Her trembling hand tightened on the hem of her shirt as if trying to suppress her rising emotions. I was stunned. I didn't expect that Chuvu Nin's father had passed away. "I'm sorry, at that time my family didn't believe you, thinking you were lying. But the person who really lied was Ton Din. He never went to see any specialist at all. My father's illness continued to drag on, with no one to treat him. If we had listened to you at that time and gone to find that top expert to examine him, maybe he would still be alive now." Speaking of this, Chuvu Nin covered his face and sat down on the ground, sobbing. I stood still, feeling a bit indescribable. For a month here, every day I witnessed the scene of separation and farewell. I thought I had long become numb to death, but now hearing these words from Chuvu Nin, my heart still can't help but feel bitter. Anyway, from the beginning, my father-in-law treated me well. "I'm sorry, I've always been looking for you. I wanted to personally apologize to you. Only later did I know that you didn't simply quit your job, but wanted to become a doctor without borders. That's why I didn't hesitate to come here from far away. Please follow me home, okay? This place is too dangerous. I've already lost my father. I can't lose you too." I shook my head. "No, I won't go home. As a doctor without borders, now I no longer belong to any country. Where can I go? Only when the war ends. No one needs us anymore. Can I return home? Before that day comes, anywhere in the world can be my home. I really know I was wrong. I shouldn't have lied to you. I shouldn't have thought myself right and gave birth to that baby. Now I have to pay the price. Now Ton Din's health is very weak. The doctor said he may only have a few more days left. Death. How am I supposed to live alone with my child? I once said I would protect you all my life." I forcefully withdrew my hand from her hands. "We are divorced, Chuvu Nin. What happens to your life in the future is your business. I still have work to do. This place is very dangerous. You should return to your country soon." Having finished speaking, I turned around and walked towards the barracks. "Then I won't go home either. I'll stay here with you, waiting until you finish everything you want to do. I'll go home with you." I didn't want to pay attention to her words. I just quietly turned away. But before I could take a few steps, I heard Chuvu Nin receive a call that seemed to be from a domestic hospital. "What? Is Ton Din about to die? I will return home immediately. You must wait for me to return." At that moment, 2 bombers suddenly flew across the sky. The familiar sound of engines rang out. Instinctively, I immediately rushed forward, and pushed Chu Nin to the ground. She shouted from the line, "Are you crazy?" But soon, her voice was drowned out by a fierce explosion in the distance. The ground shook violently. Dust and sand from the explosion covered us. I didn't pay attention to her anger, slowly raised my head to look around, and then quickly stood up. Chu Nin was clearly stunned and sat down on the ground, unable to react. I turned around and looked at her, then pulled her up and away from inside. I was used to life-threatening attacks like this, but for her, this was the first time experiencing the horror of war. Her lips trembled. Are you going to die here?" "No." I remained silent. It took a while to reply. "I'll ask the captain to arrange someone to take you home in a moment. Don't come back here in the future." Chu Nin's face was covered with dust. She held the phone tightly in her hand and said nothing. Very quickly, the team leader found a local person who drove an old pickup truck and waved for Chu Nin to quickly get in the car. Before leaving, I quietly stuffed 2 more bills into the driver's hand, telling him to take her safely to the airport. Even though there is no longer any love between Chu Nin and I cannot stand by and watch her die here. Chu Nin said nothing, seemingly still immersed in the fear from before. When I turned around, I could only see her figure hastily jumping into the car. The corners of my lips curled up slightly, but I couldn't say another word. Slightly raised his eyebrows, as if he had already anticipated her reaction. Very quickly after that, I put this matter behind me. Until 2 years later, I had the opportunity to return to my country. Now, I have a deeper and more comprehensive understanding of medicine. This time, returning with me was also my girlfriend. We met on the battlefield, and she had her face destroyed to protect me. I promised to take care of her all my life. After a long time together, I gradually realized my true feelings. I think perhaps God saw that I was so lonely and pitiful, so he brought fate before me. This time I will definitely cherish my love. Immediately upon returning home, the director of the Central Hospital personally came to the airport to welcome me. He looked at me with joy and exclaimed, "You've gotten a lot darker and you've gotten thinner. The past 2 years have been very hard outside, right?" Those simple words of concern made my heart shake strongly. I tried to control the stinging feeling on the bridge of my nose and stretched out my arms to hug the director. But just after taking a few steps, I saw a familiar figure in the distance. Chu Nin was standing there holding the hand of a boy. I don't know where she got the information from, but she still ran to the airport to pick me up. In just 2 short years, she's changed quite a bit. No longer radiant and beautiful like before, but instead has a more mature look. She didn't come forward, and I just quietly looked at her with an expressionless face. My girlfriend realized something and immediately took the initiative to hold my hand, clasping her fingers together. "Is something wrong? Is that your ex-wife? Do you want to come over and say hello? It looks like she still has a lot to say to you." I withdrew my eyes and shook my head slightly. There's nothing to say. From the moment I left that monthly party, there was nothing more between me and her. We became strangers. There was nothing left to say. I looked away and turned to get in the car. Not long after the car rolled away, I received a text message from Chu Nin. For the past 2 years, she has been sending me messages, but because I don't use a domestic phone number, I have never received them. And just a minute ago, she sent a 3-word message. "I'm sorry." I touched the screen. My finger hesitated for a long time, then decided to block the number and delete the message. I took out the SIM card, broke it, and threw it out the window, like I was throwing away all the unnecessary memories, mistakes, and hurts of the past. Everything gradually disappeared like dust blowing in the wind, leaving only a feeling of relief and peace. Thank you for watching the video. If there is any good story that hasn't been posted yet, you can comment below.